feel like life has been coming at me fast in many different directions, and a big theme that's been replaying over and over has been with friendships and vulnerability and intimacy in friendships, which has always been hard for me. Maybe it's the Chiron in the third house, maybe it's Pluto in the third house, but I've always had a core wound with friendships. I think the main thing for me is the shame around feeling like you need people around you. And I don't know why that's shameful. It just feels heavy and feels burdensome. And I think the main thing that I experience when you are needing community is having the words to say that you need community. That's the hardest part, because it's so easy to expect people to be there and expect them to read your mind and expect them to know that you need them, and that's just not how it works, unfortunately. I wish. There's been many things that have contributed to this friendship wound, but I feel like unfortunately a majority of those things have been me and self-induced, which is so heartbreaking. One of the main things for me is communicating my feelings and being vulnerable and creating intimacy from the ground up. Over the past few years, I've been really trying to implement actively sharing how I feel with people, which is very hard and very anxiety inducing, because you never know how they're going to respond, right? Like you don't know how people are going to take what you're saying. And I think that learning faith over fear has been something that I've really tried to do, especially with my friends, right? Because you think that you're surrounding yourself with good quality people. There has to be some reality where they care about how you feel and they care about your feelings. But for some reason, the shameful narrative that I'd share with myself was, I'm being needy, I'm being a burden. If they had time for me, they would give it to me. Me asking for or needing more from them is going to make them not want to give me anything at all, which is so strange. So because of that narrative that I built for myself, I previously in the past would just fall off the face of the earth to people. I just felt as though my cross to bear of feeling these negative emotions was mine. And to put that onto other people was unfair, especially when they're just living their lives and trying to be happy. They're not maliciously trying to hurt me, therefore I will deal with this on my own and let them be happy, which is so ass backwards, especially with somebody who wants to try and build community. That's okay. We live and we learn. But that's really been put to the test for me. I recently had two friends who obviously were living their lives, doing what they needed to do, but I, was just feeling a little bit disconnected from them. I've had these friends for a really long time, one since I was 12, and, one since I was in high school, and these are really close people that I trust and have a lot of faith in. So I pulled my pants up and I got some courage and I texted them and I just let them know, like, I miss you. I feel like I haven't seen you. I want to feel more a part of your life and whatever that means for us. And I'd love to chat about how we can move forward in that, because I love you and I want to experience you more often. I'm in the middle of editing this, and I'm even having to take myself out of the shame spiral of the idea that, like, I don't need to talk to my friends all the time. Some people are very, very private and very independent, and kudos to you. I think that that's great. I think for a lot of my friends, I am like that. I think in these cases, and it's funny that I even have to explain myself, but this is the internet. In these cases, like, I'm strictly talking about, like, close friends, like people who, I've kept in my life and will keep in my life for a very long time, and people who I consider family. Those are the people that I want to feel like they're a part of my life. I want to feel a part of their life as well. And I think that that's a fair assessment of the situation. But even watching this back, I have to remind myself that I'm the type of person that likes to maintain my connections in that way when they are that close. And and that when it comes to connections that close, it is that serious for me. So I just shared how I felt with them, and I had a lot of anxiety. Surprisingly, but not surprisingly, they were very receptive. We had a conversation of what being more connected looked like, talked about, where we were at and if we could offer that to each other, gave them grace, because in that moment I shared how I felt and I could put aside my feelings after I did that. And I think that's the hardest part when you're holding on to a level of resentment and not sharing how you feel and holding that in for you to deal with it. You can't put your feelings aside because you're holding on so hard to them. I find now, no matter how uncomfortable it is, I've allowed the trust in my friends to know that they are safe enough to tell them how I feel. And that took a long time. That took a lot of trust building. And my friend, she likes to say this term, collecting marbles. I believe that's also from Brene Brown, but collecting marbles. And I feel as though each time I felt more trust and comfortability and safety in her, it was just another marble collected. And despite how many marbles you have with somebody, it's still going to be scary and hard to maintain that courageousness that comes with sharing vulnerability and sharing how you feel. Charlie XCX said it best. It's so confusing to be a girl. I really wanted to stop feeling so self-isolated, because obviously, inevitably, what happens is you just reach a level of self-isolation because you're not going to talk to anybody, you're not going to share how you feel, and so therefore people are just not going to know how to connect with you. And I wanted to stop that. I wanted to start proving myself wrong and taking self-accountability. I want to be able to trust myself and knowing that I know how to pick people around me, and nobody's perfect. We all have our faults. We're not flawless people. And me not allowing others to at least make their case, I'm essentially trying to protect myself for if they are actually being malicious towards me or whatever the reason. I feel as though going about friendships in such a self-isolating and toxically independent way caused so much self-isolation and a feeling of validating my own negative narrative. So I went from a very codependent mindset of expecting others to bring me into their lives and show me a good time. And when I no longer fit into their life, I no longer fit into their schedule, it was a negative validation that I wasn't worth having around as a friend, as a person. I wasn't fun enough that day. I didn't put on a good show. Maybe I was a little bit too emotional. Maybe I drove them away. Whatever narrative was going on that day. Recently, I wanted to go to the movies. I wanted to go see a movie. And instead of going by myself, which I usually would, I texted a friend saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Would you like to join me? And in that moment, it was so, it's one of those things where you sit there and you're like, this is so common knowledge, but it's not. It's common sense is not common. And for me, it was an awakening moment of being like, this is how I bring people into my life. I'm doing stuff that I want to do, stuff that I would do by myself anyways. And if they want to join, they can join. And if they don't, then that's okay. And I can still go and be happy doing that. And slowly, I've started to understand how I can be a good friend while also being a person outside of being people's friends. Blame it on the 7th house placements if you'd like, but I'm not just a reflection of the people around me. I'm not just an extension of them. I'm also a standalone person, and I'm happy to be that, but I also enjoy the interdependence of community. I also enjoy depending on others. I enjoy them depending on me. I enjoy a feeling of intimacy and camaraderie that being alone just can't compare. It's very hard, and I find myself wanting to run away from needing others, but I find as I balance my time and myself that the needing of others doesn't feel as big. It doesn't feel as much of a burden. Because if they're not there in that moment, that's fine. I can figure something out. I can journal. I can meditate. I can relax and go for a walk. I can do many, many things. And it's not going to feel like I have to do it. Introspectively, I see myself emotionally growing as a person and working toward maintaining healthy relationships that I can feel safe and proud of. But also, I look back and see all the moments where I wasn't the most healthiest person and I created a narrative and I made enemies in my head. Not because they were true enemies, but because I needed some way to cope with how I was feeling because it just felt so bad. Of course, with that, it's a mourning of what could have been for many people, for many friendships, for many sources of community. I look back and I didn't understand. And I didn't know, I didn't have the words. There needs to be a balance between self-reliance and community. And it can be hard to have that balance. It can be hard to put your ego aside and share how you feel with the possibility that it's not going to be well received. But it's a disservice to the people that love you to not know how you feel, to not know where you're coming from, and to not have their say in the narrative that you're sharing internally. Intimacy grows when uncomfortable conversations are had, when you can share your internal world with somebody and share fears and share negative emotions. Here I am creating more intimacy with my friends. Here I am, scarily enough, sharing how I feel and being vulnerable. I still struggle with it, but it is something that I am much more willing to do because it allows me to know where I'm safest. And that's something that I'd like to know as I've gotten older. There's no need to fake it. There's no need to pretend. I want authenticity. I want interdependence. I want community. And if I want that, then I need to play a part in it. I can't just hope that someone else offers it to me.